My name is Dr. Bernadette Bird Bowen, any pronouns, or Dr. Bird for short, and I am a late in life realized, non binary, neuroqueer, autistic, ex academic, PhD in media and communication, leftist, not neoliberal, author, and content creator. 5 days ago, as of writing this complaint, I was wrongfully terminated and retaliated against from Western Governors University for the events I will describe in detail below. Ever since, all sides of neo-Nazi social media platforms have publicly humiliated and targeted harassed me, which I have begun archiving extensively on a Google Drive I've called Charlie's Fans, demonstrating the stochastic terrorism his life inclined and his fan base takes part in on his behalf. The following is a brief summary of all the events that led me to file this complaint. I should start by saying WGU seemed like a positive place to work at the start. They had the most thorough DEI trainings of any university I'd ever worked for, and I have attended or worked as a professor at a few over the years. However, as a public autistic content creator who has been and is vocal about my therapist in 2019 telling me that my pursuing a formal diagnosis for autism would hurt me more than it would help me at this point, that I have made a political decision not to seek a formal diagnosis. Not just because of the well-documented workplace discrimination of autistic people, regardless of formal diagnosis, but also because of the rampant discrimination against autistic folks worldwide and the ongoing and overt eugenics and fascist hate speech building, which I expressed to my manager and WGU's version of an HR representative during events below. Long story short, research shows the biased traditional diagnostic criteria for autism has failed millions, if not billions, of especially Black and brown gender marginalized folks. Even when we fit the stereotype for a wide variety of reasons, I and countless others have published and made content about now for years. Research also shows that not only is self-diagnosis valid and accurate, but as my own research has detailed, has been a massive movement since especially COVID-19 has started. A few final contextual comments before I shift into the series of events more specifically regarding my complaint of wrongful termination and retaliation. It is also crucial for me to note that regardless of formal diagnosis, autistic folks experience the same levels of individual, familial, social, and workplace discrimination. This is because, to institutional dismay and protest, we are autistic whether we have formal documentation or not, and there are countless reasons for us to not, beyond the exorbitant costs, $2,000 to $5,000 of doing so. Historically, as my research documents, our colonial capitalist U.S. society was founded upon a rotten eugenics foundation. Racisms, ableisms, classisms, and cis-heterosexisms, etc. Foundation which bore dehumanizing logics and practices. As I was invited to give a talk on at WGU just a couple months ago, those inhumanely and taken for granted biases manifest in our education systems. The education systems go on to train our authorities and decision makers in our societies. Considering the asylum-filled and otherwise horrific Nazi eugenicist history of our global and societal misunderstandings of the autism spectrum, this has resulted in a pattern of autistic people who have a tenacity for naivety, experiencing lifelong mischaracterization, infantilization, sexualization, being ostracized for speaking out inappropriately due to our ignorance of or disrespect of social hierarchy. Among a whole host of other results, this has led to us being at high risk for mistreatment, bullying, exploitation, domestic, sexual, legal, and police violences, homelessness, forced institutionalization and institutionalization, suicidal ideation and taking of our own lives, and general lower quality of life and life expectancy because all of the former and more. As always, any one autistic person's experiences intersect and compound based upon their social location, race, bodily ability, gender and sex, class, etc. And as research shows, the more disenfranchised an autistic person is, the more systemic violences we experience. And lastly, to mention, in recent years, researchers have also found that we have an exceptionally long list of common comorbidities, POTS, EDS, MCAS, and many more. They make us especially susceptible and at risk for severe cases of COVID-19 and post and long COVID disabilities. Meaning, alongside the ever-present environmental racisms and injustices, especially Black and brown autists live every day, since the vast majority of the global public has not been properly educated on or expected to ignore the now going on 6 years of C19 research that shows this virus causes anyone full body damage, regardless of vaccination status, symptom and experience awareness, or positive and negative test result, our lives have been put in danger. Again, the global public's decision to largely pretend that COVID-19 is over or a non-issue has consequences on our vulnerable community regardless of whether we have a formal diagnosis or not. And this has gone on alongside RFK Jr.'s equally eugenics-based rhetorical efforts, suggesting the US government put autistic and ADHD folks in wellness camps, the same rhetoric Nazis used 100 years ago. We must name these systemic acts of violence what they are as they are happening. These covert and overt attacks on autistic people, who are also more likely to be queer, were stacked on top of all pre-existing violences, contaminating, sickening, disabling, and killing especially otherwise disabled, institutionalized, non-English speaking or non-verbal Black and brown autistic children and elderly folks worldwide. And as capitalists would have it, any and all workers who have been forced to work in-person jobs in our ongoing environment plus virus era, that has wholesale normalized repeat reinfection, causing our most disenfranchised community members, often improperly named yet pervasive death tolls, from blood clots, strokes, heart attacks, aneurysms, etc. Meanwhile, those of us, myself included thus far, who have had the white socioeconomic privileges to be able to do so, have been left behind to live in self-imposed, solitary, confined, ethical loneliness, and inside the increasingly mold-contaminated yet overpriced apartments, living paycheck to paycheck in inescapable millennial debt poverty caused by billionaire housing monopolization and wealth hoarding. This is all to say that I took this position as a WGU program mentor mainly because I wanted to assist my students in a way that centered their humanness in a deeply cruel and unusual world that bases their worth on productivity and usefulness and conformity to industries. At the beginning of said role in 2024, I chose to disclose my autism to my coworkers during our team meeting. For the vast majority of the time, they seemingly embraced my disability and neurotype difference. That is, beyond my occasional speaking out in town hall meetings against injustices that I had heard or seen, as was appropriate, because when public discriminatory statements are made, as an expert in identities, relationships, technologies, and systems of power, I know that it is of the utmost importance we say something when we see something, as was the alleged understanding of WGU in DEI trainings. All those periodic moments where I did just that, and numerous coworkers across departments privately came forward thanking me for doing so, I was never once pulled aside to discuss my doing so. As time passed and I became more and more involved in the Pride and Disability Owls communities at WGU, I was invited to be on panels about my books, my critical media ecological takes on disabilities, and my experiences and expertise as an expert and disabled program mentor. I was deeply appreciative of my community for their support and willingness to hear my critical work and how I could be assistance in making sure that WGU truly was practicing what they preached. And then I talk about what I shared in my Speak Up report. After watching my post slowly growing in audience, which also allowed me to process the gravity of what I had just done, I messaged my manager telling her that the more I thought about all of this, the more I realized that what Scott did caused me emotional damage and felt like political harassment, so I requested 2 weeks off vacation, which she approved. That night, my post went viral, and I decided to share only one smaller portion of the meeting that day in attempts to respect my manager and the HR person's privacy. That post was viral on TikTok, then on Twitter by neo-Nazis, and then on Threads. Alongside the overwhelming support I received from WGU students, faculty, and staff, and other folks coming forward telling me this was a long time coming, I was target harassed and publicly humiliated by all magnitudes of neo-Nazi accounts and their bot farm armies, much of which, at the very beginning, as I stated, I documented and archived on Charlie's Fans. Mind you, these neo-Nazis accused me of faking this video because they couldn't see my manager or HR person on the screen at all. If you are not already aware of this from watching circulating videos, Charlie Kirk was notorious for telling rape victims and survivors and folks who experience all forms of hate speech that they were lying about it, so this is once again completely on brand for their hateful congregation. This is an ideological pattern characteristic of stochastic terrorism, especially with the triangulated levels of targeted harassment that I've been subjected and documented just over the last 5 days alone. Since being fired, I've been contacted by many more past and current WGU students, faculty, and staff applauding my act of bravery, expressing their disappointment and disgust at how the university handled this entire situation, and sharing their own experiences of disability rights issues, hostile work environment, wrongful termination, and retaliation. I also received an anonymous call from someone who clearly doxed me and or stalked out my personal contact information and attempted to strike fear into me, saying where I lived and that they were down by the pool at my apartment complex looking for me. I'm no lawyer, but I believe there's a solid case for class action lawsuit. At the very least, disability discrimination, wrongful termination, and retaliation on the basis of current legal charges, as well as slanderous doxing websites.